welcome back to the next book review with the wonderful Bob Cooke, and I'm Jacci Jones, and we're going to be looking at a book called Integrative. I can't even say it, Bob.
Integrative.
That's the one. Integrative Psychotherapy, a mindfulness and compassion-oriented approach. And
yes.
I just love the title. It's by Gregor
Žvelc and Maša Žvelc.
Well done, Bob.
yeah. Okay, so I'm in a different place, as you can see today. Usually I'm at home, and behind me I usually have a picture of a Doctor Who Dalek.
Yes.
Which my daughter, who's obsessed with Daleks, put into my office at home.
Oh, that's lovely.
She's now 22, but she was obsessed with these characters. But now I'm at the Manchester Institute office, which has behind me loads of, I don't know, lists of different things, and I'm in a nice big black chair.
It's all blurred out, so it's confidential still. Nobody can zoom in.
You can't really see it. I can't really see it. It's just lists of his own courses. But anyway, this book, one of my favorite books by two of my favorite authors. So Gregor and Maša are co-owners, if you like, or co-directors of IPSA, which is a psychotherapy training institute in Slovenia. So they're Slovenian. I've known them for many years, and I go over most years to teach on their training courses at this institute in psychotherapy. So I've been doing that for a long time, and they've been coming over here.
That's brilliant.
And I think 17 years. I think it's the 18th year this year. And wow. They've written a book, which is this one. And what I really like about it, besides having the title Integrative Psychotherapy on it, their approach is driven by their research, their passion of integrative psychotherapy and mindfulness and compassion. Now, I was looking at your website earlier, I think a couple of days ago, Jacci, and I've noticed that you also have a passion in mindfulness.
Here and now stuff, I love it. I'm always talking about it.
Yeah, and compassion you mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah. This book should be right up your street. Basically, in some ways, it's a textbook for people who really like the idea of integration and integration psychotherapy, which is basically what I said, integrating the different parts of ourselves, taking ownership of a holistic whole, and then moving on. But the meta processes that drive the integration, according to Gregor and Maša, are their ideas around mindfulness and compassion. So they're the meta processes that drive the integration. So in this book, besides talking about what integrative psychotherapy is, and again, they were students of Richard Erskine, and in a previous book review, I've talked about Richard Erskine, who's the president of the Integrative Association in your European wise. International Psychotherapy Association, yeah. They are students, or were of them. They're not now, they're trainers and supervisors in their own right in that modality. But they bring their wealth and belief and passion around mindfulness as the meta processes that drives the integration. So they talk in this book about different types of mindfulness in the here and now, mindfulness which is basically around not just being in the here and now, but being aware of what's happening internally in the here and now. So they have two different types of mindfulness. One I think they called, I can't remember, I think it's maybe it's personal mindfulness. You'll have to look in the book.
Yeah.
But I know it was around internal and external mindfulness, which they compared to the ideas of contact, internal and external contact from integrative psychotherapy. So how do you see mindfulness for you then, Jacci?
Relating to transactional analysis, I always think of mindfulness being, and the here and now stuff, being in the adult ego state. It's kind of, we're not in the past and we're not trying to predict the future. I talk about it a lot. I was actually talking with a client about it this morning, and they were referring to feeling flat and numb and saying, you know, I was in the here and now, I just felt flat. And I was like, well, that's not being in the here and now. You know, if you're feeling flat, then, you know, you're absent of anything. You know, for me, being in the here and now is noticing without judgment.
Right.
There's no memories being triggered.
Correct.
There's nothing. We're just in the moment. That's how I see it.
Correct. So you're right up their street, because they have a concept or model, if you like, called, their idea is around integrated adult, and particularly what they call observing ego, observing adult ego. In other words, what you have just said, being in the here and now, but also concentrating on what's happening internally in the here and now, and being aware what's happening internally, as well as being aware of what's happening externally.
Yeah.
And they have models talking about how they would use mindfulness within an integrated approach. And I think one of their concepts, which they take from the Erskine's integrative model, which is called the diamond model, which you might know of, called within the self model, I think, by Richard Erskine, which basically talks about within a diamond fashion, behavior, cognition, emotion, physiology, and spiritualism as ways of meeting the client, if you like.
Yeah.
But they also
talk. Added spiritualism to that.
Yeah, it's a recent added spirituality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marsha and Gregor talk about the observing ego and how mindfulness can be one of the processes also driving this integration. So they have some good models around mindfulness and compassion. The idea of utilizing compassion, and from transaction analysis, you might want to use the idea of the nurturing parent when we talk about compassion and how to utilize
compassion that. is one of those things. Again, it's something that I talk a lot about, but it's really difficult for somebody to feel compassionate towards somebody that they feel has wronged them in some way. And you know, it sounds awful, but if you throw a bit of love in the mix, we can't feel negative, but it's really difficult sometimes to be compassionate when we don't like them. Yeah,
so what I would say back to that, well, yes, I agree with you, is that first step is compassionate for yourself. If you can't find compassionate or love, if you want to use that word, for yourself, you're not likely so easily to find compassion and love for other people. So it starts really, I think, with compassion and love for yourself. Then, of course, you've got the externalization of that. And with people, of course, you have challenges with, it becomes harder. But the first step, I believe anyway, is compassion and love for yourself.
Which links into the integrating that.
Which is the integrating they talk about.
Yeah.
So this is a
That's
textbook.
Brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it's
when you talk about models, are we talking diagrams and things?
Yes. So they have a diagram, the diagram of the diamond model, and superimposed on that is the observing integrated adult. And they have different models, like 4 stages of, I can't quite remember the names, not quite 4 stages of consciousness, but they have different models to explain how mindfulness and compassion can be integrated in the process of integration.
That's good, because those of us that are thinkers, I think that's one of the reasons why I love transactional analysis, because there's diagrams and models that make sense of all the theory.
Oh, well, this book is full of models.
I need to buy that book then. I do. It's full easy to explain it. You know, people can grasp it when they've got something that they can look at sometimes, rather than you know, some people are really good just going with their feelings, but others like me, I need to hang it on a picture somehow.
Okay, well, if you like models, this book's for you. And this book is for students of integrative psychotherapy, and particularly what I talked about in an earlier video, the developmental relational integrative model, which is pioneered by Richard Erskine, who they were students of, but are now trainers and supervisors in that movement. So he was their mentor, and they were highly influenced by him, and hence their passion for the developmental relational integrative model. But what it comes over in this book very much is their passion for mindfulness and compassion as meta processes, which drive the integration. And they do really talk, well, you'd like it because of the models, but they talk quite passionately and avidly about how you can use compassion and mindfulness in the aid of integration. And also in the last section of the book, if you like, they give clinical vignettes of clinical examples of how this is possible. And throughout the book, really, they have clinical examples. You would call it a textbook, I think, because it's not a book that you just read straight off. It's a book that you would dip into.
Yeah.
And it's also got a lot of models. So even though you might like models, and I think you say like models because you like perhaps the visualization of it, as well as the cognition. You've got to really, I wouldn't say you have to learn one model at a time, but it's not a book that you would just sit down and read the 200 pages before breakfast.
No, I wouldn't do that anyway, Bob. I'm a very slow reader.
It's a book
that's the other thing. I don't know. How are you managing to get through all these books?
Well, this is my 89th book. I've had a gap of a year. Since the previous 87 with Roy, and we did them every 2 weeks, and we did 2 books at a time, about a quarter of an hour on each book. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of them I did know, but I reread most of the 80 odd to actually to be able to do the review. So to answer your question, I'm not quite sure, but I have had a very big extensive training in integrative psychotherapy and transactional analysis. So I sort of au fait with the concepts, but there's a lot of new books come out in transactional analysis and a lot of new books come out in integrative psychotherapy. And this one, I highly recommend. I highly recommend because I love the idea of mindfulness and compassion being the meta processes for the driving of integration.
Yeah.
And that is something which I believe in, and secondly, I've seen in practice. The other thing that I really like about this book is that they emphasize that the therapist needs to model the mindfulness approach. In other words, the therapist themselves needs to be mindful of their internal own processes in order to model that to the client when they are going to encourage the client to use the processes of mindfulness and compassion. So they are modeling that.
Links into what we've spoken in the 2 previous ones about, you know, it's that therapeutic relationship. It's you being, you know, open and authentic in that room with what's going on for you, as well as, you know, is that the modeling that you're talking about?
Absolutely. That you model this in what is called the intersubjective space. You know, what's happening between the 2 subjects, either the client and the therapist here. And without that modeling that you're talking about, the relationship becomes less potent, I believe.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, because several reasons. One, because of the whole concept of transference, which is not a book on transference this at all. But the second one is, of course, is we can just explain this, if you like, by basic modeling downwards, so that the client takes on a positive modeling to be able to incorporate that whole process internally as well as externally.
Yeah.
Yeah, this book talks a lot about the internal and external dimensions, and I think that is really one of the basic concepts within psychotherapy and psychological integration, which is a sense of contact internally and externally. If the person's aware of those two dimensions, then integration is much more possible.
Yeah.
So again, it's a book for students of integrative psychotherapy, a book for students who like the idea of mindfulness and compassion and like the idea of combining those two. A book for people who like models, like yourself. Yeah. And generally, I think people who are interested in the whole concept of psychotherapy, I think it should be on the book list for students in those two disciplines.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to look at that, especially because you said, you know, it's about dipping in and out. I like most of my psychotherapy books, I don't think I've read them cover to cover. I do dip in and out of them when something comes up for me.
Well, the book that we're going to do next, which I'm not sure you'll like then because it's got no models in it at all.
No, I don't want to read that one.
Which is by somebody called Bolus. I'll send it to you. It's 3 Expressions of Narcissism, I think it's called.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a bit highbrowed in the sense there's no models. I'll send you the exact title, but this book, you know, as I said, if you're really a fan, especially of developmental, relational, integrative psychotherapy, then buy this. If you book a transaction, if you're a fan of transactional analysis, actually buy this.
Yeah.
But of course, if you like mindfulness and compassion in the service of integration, buy this.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of that holistic approach, looking at, you know, that diamond with the spirituality in there, as well as the physiological and thinking and feeling and all that stuff. Yeah,
I remember what that model is now. It's called the self in relationship model, often called the diamond model, which is a very interesting model anyway, to look at how to contact clients, which dimension of the self that you contact. But put on top of that, the idea of the observing integrated adult, I think they call it, or put on top of the idea of mindfulness and compassion as the major focus of integration, you get a very nice model.
Yeah, yeah. Because we are all unique and individual, do you know what I mean? And certain things appeal and certain things don't. So if you've got a model that kind of covers the whole sphere, yeah, I quite like that. Thank you so much, Bob.
You're welcome, and look forward to next one, which I'm sorry has no models in. And I think it's just called 3 Expressions of Narcissism, but it might be called the 3 Expressions of Narcissism and Borderline. It's a bit highbrow, but I can devise some models for you. But I know that book has.
In future, Bob, can you pick books that have got pictures in?
Yeah, this is why you like TA. Because TA today specifically, but a lot of the TA books, they have loads of models, don't they?
I need pictures in my books, please, Bob.
Okie dokie. Well, nice talking to you. Catch up.
See you next time.
Bye. Bye.